salt. So I want to talk about salt and salting meat today, why we do it, and some myths surrounding it. Because not long ago I was listening to some podcasts with some fitness chefs, people talking about cooking, food and meal prep, and they talk about how salt dries meat out, so we don't salt meat. I have a different take on that based on chemistry as to why we salt meat and how that works to make meat taste much nicer. So, and I'm going to show you too. I have got two incredibly tasty porterhouse steaks from a local butcher close by to me, Perry's of Eccleshaw. These are delicious looking and they smell great, and because I'm going to be grilling them, over hot coals. I'm going to salt them both to make them taste better and to make them retain moisture. So contrary to popular belief, throwing salt onto your meat doesn't cause you huge problems. So if you salt your meat and you leave it for just a short period of time, it will draw water out from the meat to the surface. If you were then to cook it, you'd have a very salty crust on your meat. If you were to wash that off or brush that off, you would lose a lot of moisture from within the meat. That's one of the big problems that people are making when they salt meats and they say that it dries them out. You have to salt your meat for quite a while before you actually cook it. So if I salt these now, what will happen over a short period of time, even now, you'll see it happening on the surface of the meat, it will start to break down, become shiny, and turn into a slightly salty slurry on the surface of the meat. That's absolutely fine. All chemical elements, all compounds have electrical charges. They interact differently with water, with other ones. The other thing that happens when you salt meat, as the meat breaks, as the water comes from the meat and the salt breaks down and the slurry forms, it then starts to interact with the proteins on the surface of the meat and within the entered layers of the meat. It denatures them, it makes them more tender, and this denaturing of the proteins, which you've probably heard about from cooking other foods, is some of the reasons why we get such tasty cooked food, increases the water holding capacity of the proteins as well. So you actually get more succulent, juicy meat. So what happens is the water breaks down and this is drawn to the surface of the meat here. It then turns into this slurry, then given time, the meat then reabsorbs it and it goes back inside. That is also a really good way to get flavour into the meat, because with the salty water re-entering the meat, being reabsorbed by the cut, you can also get, hitchhiker ride with some spices and some herbs in there. So it's not terrible. The other thing that you might be thinking is, why would I want to salt meat? I'm a healthy person. Now, this is just flaked kosher salt, flaked sea salts, right? Pretty much all salt comes from the sea. The thing with that is table salt, which is synthesized, doesn't come from the sea. We have to iodize our table salts because of how they're produced. It's not unusual, it's not unheard of to see people who are very healthy eaters, very health conscious, preparing all their food from scratch, using lots of nice fresh vegetables, prime cuts of meat, to completely eschew salting and stop salting anything. That's one of the few sources that we get iodine from in our diet. If we're not eating things like seaweed and seafood source vegetables, then it's unlikely that we get a huge amount of iodine. And it's not unheard of to see these very well-meaning people having very low iodine intakes, and iodine is crucial for thyroid health. So, it's not going to kill you. If you're eating a healthy quantity of meat, not a huge amount week in, week out, you're eating decent quality, and you're salting it to make it taste better, you generally are very unlikely to have anything to worry about. Obviously, if you're prone to things like high blood pressure and you need to keep your salt low, you'll have specific guidelines from your GP on this. Some people also refer to this as dry brining their meat, adding this salt, as much as you would if you were seasoning it, to the outside of the meat. As the water is drawn out from the surface of the meat to the salt, it breaks the salt down, sodium chloride, plus the water molecules break down. You get a sort of slurry forming. If you were to then just wash that straight off, yes, you're going to have dried out meat. You're going to have meat where the moisture has been removed. If you were to cook it straight away without doing anything to it, you're going to have salty meat. The meat surface is going to be very salty. However, if you leave it for the water to then begin to re-enter the meat after salting, as it's forming this sort of shiny coating on the surface, if you leave that, the salt will then sit just underneath the surface of the meat, helping it retain more moisture, not drying it out. The other thing with that is the salt interacts with the proteins in the meat and causes them to break down, it causes them to denature. This denaturing causes the proteins in the meat to also hold more water. The other thing that this is going to help you do is hitchhike a ride with some seasonings into the meat. So as normally you'd leave this for quite a long time until this process happens, but there's no harm in doing this now. This is why a lot of seasonings contain salt. As this salt is starting to break down, I will put a small amount of garlic powder on the outside of my steak as well. I don't want to spoil it. These are going to be absolutely delicious. Like I've said, they're porterhouse steaks from a local butcher, Perry's, and they smell fantastic. And this will act as a little hitchhike to help get the meat in. So a little bit of garlic powder, a little bit of freshly ground pepper. That is all you really need to make a steak absolutely delicious. So in summary, very, very quick biochem lesson on salt. Salt your meat, leave it to rest, then cook it. Don't salt and cook, don't salt and wash.